Okay, we are back in Senate Economic Development, Housing, and General Affairs on Thursday, February 22nd. We have some kind of order for this important topic of last year we started looking more in depth at firefighter cancer coverage and has some legislation, but also have a report back. And so I have Chris Doovey actually going first, just because I think it helps us frame up the issue of why this is critical and why we need to be continuing our work in this area. So if Chris would take the witness chair from the professional firefighters.
The hot seat again. Eh?
Yeah.
So good morning, for the record. My name's Chris Newby, President of Professional Firefighters of Vermont. I'm also a career captain in Hartford, Vermont. Coming up on 32 years, getting close to retirement, thank God.
Okay.
Thank you, Madam Chair, for allowing me to say a couple of words on this, and distinguished members of the committee. Appreciate you taking the time to hear this. So my perspective, and I don't want you to think I'm putting a wedge between volunteers and careers. My knowledge, my numbers, all that are based on the career side.
And we were asked by volunteer folks to try not to say career, I think. I just want to remember correctly.
It might, so
You say
it's an occupational. So we say occupational.
Occupational, yeah. Just because they do it for a long time.
Yes, yeah.
Though they don't get.
Yeah, we get in those debates. This is my
Right,
occupation. I've
yeah.
done it,
Yeah,
42 hours a week
right.
for 32 years.
I'm just trying to remind myself
Yeah.
how we.
So when we say that, we say career firefighter, that's your occupation, your IFF, and we represent just the career firefighters.
Right.
So to frame it a little bit, when we give you the numbers of, like they say, 14% higher incidence and all that, that was based on a cohort study of 3 career departments
Okay.
of 30,000 full-time firefighters from Philadelphia, Chicago, San Francisco. What was unique about that study, it was done in 2010. They looked at people employed between 1950 and 2009. They did an update in 2010, 2020, to kind of follow that out to see how it was tracking. The unique thing about that report, when they give you the numbers, was that it looked at full cross section, not just a specific demographics. It looked at males, females, minorities, their incidence of cancer related to the general public. So out of that report, there's a definite correlation between being a firefighter on the career side. The volunteers gonna be tougher because it's such a fluid number. But anyway, firefighting in general, there's a higher incidence of cancers. The most recent number, the IFF every year does a Fallen Firefighters Memorial out in Colorado Springs. That's last year, 63% of the names that were put up on the wall were due to occupation cancer. So we're knowing that it is of epidemic levels in the fire service, specifically in the career side. So to put in perspective, 572 names on the wall, 365 were occupation cancers.
Right.
And we're just starting to scratch the surface, I think. So I'm my 2 cents is going to come from. I'm an advocate of recognizing this as an issue and how can we slow it moving forward.
Yeah.
One of probably the best ways to do that is doing what they call early detection screenings. I know I mentioned it last year in committee.
Right.
So the current law says you've got to have your screenings based on the American Cancer Society recommendations, which is essentially the foundation of the field of ultrasound. The stuff I'm talking about is when they come in and they use ultrasound and they look at the 9 major body systems in your body. And that specific screening doesn't say you have cancer, it says you have an anomaly.
Yes.
Go to your physician and get it checked.
And that's it's a relatively affordable.
About 325 roughly.
Right.
Yeah, and that's through United Diagnostics. There's 2 companies, the IFF is part of, United Diagnostic Services and National. UBS is a little more, you see a lot more in the Northeast. It's out of New York City. He'll come in, he'll scan you, and also look at cardiac risk too, so it's not looking strictly at cancers. But he has had tremendous success. He did a department in the state where they had a suspect of I think 2 cancers. I don't know what the final outcome was, but at least they said something's wrong here, go get it checked out. It may be nothing, but it may be the cancer. The other test that you're seeing a lot of them being worked in the fire service now is the Galleri blood test. Now, it doesn't have FDA approval, they're still working on that. However, they've had enough successes around the country that more and more states are partnering with them. New Hampshire, Mass does it, that's the blood test I talked about. where they spin off from 23andMe, look at DNA markers, that they, when a cancer starts, it leaves a little nutrition. They've had tremendous success with identifying 50 cancers at stage 1 or 2,
Wow.
to the point where they can say it's coming from your pancreas or your bladder. So,
If that gets FDA approval, is it also fairly affordable?
so that's about 650 right now, because it doesn't have FDA approval.
Right.
The normal cost is right around $1,000.
Lot more.
It is.
Okay.
Yeah, but I know that a lot of, go ahead, Senator.
No, I'm just curious. So we discussed this at some length last year.
Yes.
We had a report done, and I thought this morning we were having the report presented.
Well, we are, but I wanted Chris
Okay,
to
because,
frame up the
Yeah.
issue once again.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it lays the foundation.
yeah, no,
Right.
this is good foundation.
It's good for us to
Yes.
start with firefighter.
Yeah. So and those are the two tests. There's also another one out there that states are starting to use a lot more, and it's using CT scans for contrast. If you're at high risk for certain cancer, like you've been a smoker or been exposed to something that's toxic, just as a follow-up. I've been an advocate, at least to do those two, is the ultrasound and the blood test, as an early detection, above and beyond what the current law says. So to give you another perspective, more and more states are starting to, hey, this problem, let's fund these screenings.
Yeah.
Most recently, I don't know if you follow New Hampshire that much, my counterpart over there, the professional firefighters in New Hampshire, pushed it in their Senate, they just passed a bill out of it yesterday, allocating $5 million for screenings for active and retired personnel in New Hampshire.
So that would include the volunteer firefighters.
I don't know that specific.
Okay,
Okay,
but New Hampshire is something that.
yes, but they're doing that.
Well, but the Senate passed it.
The Senate passed it unanimously out of this, now it's gonna go to their house side, I don't know how their legislative stuff works over there. I printed it off, it's a little unique, I'm happy to send it electronically if you wanna look at their proposal, but that's run through their Division of Fire, their. fire
Okay.
academy.
That's good.
Damien can look at that.
But the other ones I know of are just talking with my counterpart down in Kentucky. So Kentucky's very much like Vermont. They have as many, if not more, volunteers as careers.
Mhm.
So they're setting up a grant program also that's run through their fire academy or something. It's more like a reimbursement. So it's
Okay.
not like a carte blanche, you go and do it.
Right,
They set aside so much, and if you're doing these screenings, you can submit it to the state, get reimbursed for these screenings. So I don't know where that is in Kentucky, it's different demographics down there if you know, but they are realizing that, and their legislature is taking it up.
yeah,
So I think moving forward, I've advocated, and I know money's extremely, in this session is tight, but something that needs to be put on the horizon, and we need to start acting sooner than later on it. And my whole thing, when you hear, actuaries do reports and all that, to me, they're looking at when they have it. I can tell you from experience,
yeah,
the Hitchcock will tell you, if you come through the door with it, chances typically you're at stage 2, 3, maybe even 4. That's $1 million payout for Hitchcock. For $1,000, we can detect these and catch in stage 1 or 2.
right,
It's gonna save a lot of money to the insurance companies. And the flip side, it's gonna allow these individuals to make it to retirement. I mean, that's my ultimate goal. My ultimate goal is to retire a person at age 30,
yeah.
is to get it detected, so we're not going to the funeral at 35. So, and then the most recent numbers I got from the IFF, they're saying that, firefighters on general, based on that cohort report, the new numbers, it actually trended up a little bit. They looked at an additional 7 or 8 years from the original report. There still is a high number of cancers. We traditionally have like a 15% chance of dying of cancers compared to the general public.
Yeah.
And a 200% greater chance of developing some form of cancer. So it is of epidemic proportions. We are pushing on the federal level to try to get that recognized also, a lot tougher federally. So I guess I would ask support of the committee to consider it. And I realize that, it's gonna be hard with this biennium winding down, but kind of forward thinking, we really address this and come up with a way to do it through grants,
Right,
set aside, whatever the money, I don't want to throw numbers out,
Yeah,
but
yeah.
set aside that we can say, okay, if you're doing it, maybe run it, and I'm just throwing brainstorms and stuff.
right,
So Hartford's very good, we do annual physicals every year on our members. Done it for the last 15 years. Maybe that's the way to, and it's gonna be tough with the volunteers, I totally understand that. But to try to get the departments to comply with that FPA and doing annual physical, say, okay, if you do a physical, we will support the $1,000 to the state on doing the early detection screenings. I'm just brainstorming stuff.
yeah,
But at least I'd like you to consider that, because I'm seeing more and more states taking on this legislation. Maybe I'll ask them on my role as a state leader to do a survey to see how many states actually have legislation or are proposing legislation related to coming up with the screening, so.
That would be helpful, and also your updated data would be helpful because the report doesn't necessarily recommend taking too much action right now. I don't believe, and so were you involved in the report?
Yes,
You served on that commission,
yeah,
okay,
and realizing when we did it, it's hard to get numbers, so the career side is easy in Vermont, because there's only
That's right.
270, 280
Yeah.
members.
Right.
Volunteer side is, and Chief Skazik and, Craig, but you're looking at least 3,500
Yeah.
potentially, and it's such a fluid, they could be on today, they move, they go somewhere else, and rejoin another department. It's such a fluid group as compared to only 270, 280,
Right.
career firefighters, so. And I'm totally in support of all firefighters, I really am, I don't want you to think.
Yeah,
It's just, and I get it when the actuaries look at it, it's tough because it is such a fluid group.
Right.
My overall message is that it is a pandemic level right now. When you're doing 2/3 of your active duty deaths due to occupation cancer, that's the deal, and that's what we know about, and maybe people even on our side that may not report.
Right.
I have not to go too much, but a captain retired from Hartford, but he stayed on as a call person, he's 68, he just diagnosed cancer, so you want to get the presumption, so.
Right.
When you look at that, how many of those aren't recaptured that are 67, 68,
Exactly.
they catch to these cancers, so.
Yeah.
And the last thing I'm gonna weigh in on really quick, is the whole thing on PFAS.
Yeah.
So like there was a question asked about gear, okay? I'm totally in support of you need gear, plain and simple. But I want legislators to understand that buying gear is gonna correct cancer. What's
so your gear is,
buying new gear is gonna correct the cancer problem. The gear is what's killing us, plain and simple.
Okay.
I just got back, I was down in, Florida, and I had what they call a Philly Leadership Training Summit. And I listened to a presentation on PFAS. So, in a nutshell, the IFF is known for a long time that that gear is killing us. However, the manufacturers are always saying, no, it's not, it's fine, it's PFAS free. So we have since hired our own research team, our own set of scientists that are looking at all of these. And they're flat out telling us the industry is lying.
Wow.
There are PFAS. So when they say the PFAS free gear, they're talking primarily the outer, the shell with flame,
Okay.
okay? And I'll get into this in a second, but the other two layers,
are against your skin.
I guess they both have PFAS, the vapor barrier and the moisture barriers, high levels. Now they'll tell you it's PFAS free, but they're talking legacy PFAS that we banned in 2010, 2012. So now the big point is they're calling it per or polyfluorinated compounds, because what the industry is doing is if you look at the chemical structure for the PFAS and PFOAs, they're actually branching it out with oxygen and sulfur tails on it. So the issue these scientists are finding is that the tests they use to detect the PFAS, they don't look at certain PFAS. The industry has found out a way to make a similar type product to meet their requirements, NFPA for the moisture barrier and all that. But to do it, the test will not pick it up. So these three scientists in particular, I'll tell you right front, because it was asked when we had the class, what do? They're flat out saying, "Look, do not weigh again, which is absolutely positively necessary."
Okay.
So they're even advocating now that like for certain training evolutions, all that, because they're doing tests. One of the scientists did tests on skin parts. Typically we wear short sleeve shirts in front of the coat, so she swabbed forearms. And the numbers they were getting off of people wearing their gear even for a short time was a phenomenal amount.
Wow.
And I know the state has been very, very progressive on approaching PFAS, trying to eliminate as many things as we can. We've actually been instrumental in it at certain times with child schooling and so forth. The fact that they're still out there just scares me. And I'll go one step further. I was talking with a young lady that's going to Vermont Law School that is going to be an attorney for this. And it really set home, is what I've been hearing, and she like reinforced it for me. This industry is known for years that this was dangerous. And in the 70s, they were taking females off their assembly lines. They were producing products with PFAS.
Wow.
The industry knew in the 70s that it was dangerous. Nationally, we are working on legislation. The IFF is to mandate that within 5 years, the manufacturer comes up with a PFAS-free ensemble for us. It's gotten enough goes on, so I can honestly say that in this state, Representative Allen's been great, she signed on to it.
Great.
So we're trying to get that moving, to try to get industry to do it, so I'm all for buying a gear.
Bipartisan and.
It is, yeah, we got a good
It's gotta be
fight.
bipartisan, I mean.
When I
It is.
but.
It is, but you know as I do, jokingly, there's this function down there in DC,
Yeah,
it's
it
hard to
doesn't
get
matter.
anything.
It's
Unless it's an investigation, it ain't going anywhere.
Right,
So they are looking at that, we're pushing it, I'm gonna be down there next week,
okay,
try to let you come push it some more, because the industry can do it if they want, but they don't. It's cheaper to make this product, and that's, like I said, I'm not against gear, if they need gear, you need gear, you need to protect yourself from that.
right,
But you also gotta be aware, this is what's killing us, and it also affects not just cancers. It really opened my eyes, and when I did this class, it affects, we're starting to see more and more females, it affects them with their offspring.
right,
Okay, so any woman that's childbearing age is in this, the effects of the PFAS are just, I mean, to me, it makes me really sick. And then finding out that there's not just these cancers, there's more and more cancers they weren't telling us about that are related to it. So I just want to go on record saying that I'm all for the buying the gear, but
yeah.
understand that is not gonna correct the cancer.
Is there some kind of private right of action that our AGs could,
That's a good question, you know, it's a good question, I don't know. And like I said, so we've known, the IFF has known for years the manufacturer that line was.
yeah,
We've also seen a connection not with cancer, but even with Parkinson's disease, going back 35 years or so, like when we started wearing the full pants and coat outside.
yeah,
That they're seeing since then a steady, not a steep one, but they're saying something's going on, they're seeing an increase in
yeah,
Parkinson's disease. Why? Can we prove it? Unfortunately, in this country, you gotta do so many blind studies to say, even though the evidence certainly leads you in that direction, you've gotta do enough studies.
yeah,
But in a nutshell, we do have scientists that are looking at it, listen to 3 different scientists that did IFF is high, and all 3 are saying the same thing.
okay,
The gears playing a major impact on cancers. Until they come up with something, we have to learn, unfortunately, they're saying right now, the IFF and the Metro Fire Chiefs,
yeah,
they made a statement last year, do not wear a gear unless it's absolutely positive, and that's,
heartbreaking,
it is.
Yeah.
You know, because you think it's protecting you, when actually it's slowly killing you.
yeah. Can you access my agenda?
Yeah.
So I didn't mean to set us up.
No, I have a meeting with the AG coming up and I just wanna make sure I make a note because. We need the money from somewhere and, you know, when they knowingly violate. And we, you know, even if we did do a good job defending PFAS, I think we always try to put that. That marker in that if they are knowingly still offering products with
Yeah,
the same.
and I know there's a couple of
So-
bills pending within either the House or Senate here to look at that. And I told the sport, and I also understand if you got to carve out firefight, because there's nothing currently out there that, you know, to take that, say, you can't have that gear, so you gotta wear something.
Right, yeah,
And I think the last thing I'll leave us on is that, did you see the report when Chief Scazza talks, we talked about educating? That's the toughest thing we have to do, our service is steep in tradition. You know, it's hard to change that. We are seeing a slight curve as we get younger. The younger generation seems to be more astute to it, and they're more aware that, hey, you know, I don't want to be one of these names on the wall. You know,
I wanna be a statistic.
Yeah,
Right.
but it's gonna be a slow process, and, you know, maybe that's another thing that we look at as coming up with a way to fund better education on
sure,
these things, and
yeah.
I'll leave that to Chief Scazza.
I mean, even if we start with some kind of municipal revolving loan fund or until we
Yeah.
have more money, it's something. I'm looking at my finance colleagues as well, but I hope we could just see if we could find a source. of-
It's not like our big oil bill, quite.
Yes,
honestly.
yeah.
It's a
That's what I'm talking.
manufacturer responsibility.
Yeah.
Consumer protection.
I mean, especially when they've known since the 70s, this was bad, you know, taking
Just like big oil.
females that were or could be pregnant off their
Yeah.
assembly lines, that kind of sends a red flag.
Yeah,
And even young, you know, like I said, a young girl is becoming an attorney, she said, yeah, come out, I said, what? I've known
wow,
about this for about 40, 50 years,
yeah,
and they hide it from you, so that's why I said, that's why the IFF has hired our own research, totally
Yeah.
blind, say, here's the gear, test it.
and we appreciate that,
So-
so we have that information.
And I think, and I will gather, inform, and I'll submit it to your aid down to some of the stuff, the most
Updated data
updated stuff,
will be-
you have to look at.
Okay,
Some of it's kind of in deep with stuff, if you like to get into the technical side of it.
We do.
All right,
thanks so much.
thank you.
Thank you.
I don't have a particular order. I don't know if anybody has worked that out. I have Michael, Dirk, and then Mary. Is that fine? Okay.
I would suggest Michael, Mary, then Dirk.
Okay,
Mary, then
perfect. Okay. You got it.
If that's okay with Mary.
That's fine. That's a different one. Yeah.
So I will, I'm prepared to speak to the report, so.
Remember, we asked Chris yesterday to come in and testify, and it was a really good opening. So now,
It's a great meeting,
Yeah.
so,
Yeah.
and Chris was a part of our working group, which
Great.
you're about, so, it's appropriate. Good morning, I'm Michael Scazza, I'm the Executive Director and the Chief of Vermont Fire Academy, part of the Division of Fire Safety. And, as you know, Act 26 of 2023 was directed, the Director of the Division of Fire Safety to answer a whole bunch of questions surrounding firefighter cancer. Director DeRocha acted on that by forming a working group from representatives across the fire service, and that included representatives of the Division of Fire Safety, the Vermont Career Fire Chiefs Association, Professional Firefighters of Vermont, and a local Vermont firefighter who just happened to be a subject matter expert and is currently the president of the Firefighter Cancer Foundation. So we had some really local expertise aiding us in the creation of this report. I was appointed to facilitate the group and kind of pull things together, so that's why I'm sitting here for you today in the director's place. The fire service is gratefully afforded the time to discuss this important topic. As Chris just alluded to, the CDC has concluded that cancer is the leading cause of death among firefighters, and that they are at a higher risk of numerous different types of cancer above that the general public is exposed to. Firefighters have a 9% higher risk of being diagnosed with cancer and a 14% higher risk of dying from cancer than the general population does. So very appropriate to be talking about this.
And Michael, have you submitted this testimony to Magali?
I will.
Okay, great.
Certainly. And much of this is contained within the report
Yeah,
as well,
nice.
but this will give you a better summary as well. The higher risk faced by firefighters call for a more focused and targeted screening algorithm, which is what Chris just alluded to, than what is used for the general public. And this algorithm is best defined in a document that the fire service uses called NFPA 1582, which is a consensus standard called the Standard on Comprehensive Occupational Medical Programs for Fire Departments. And an exam that is compliant with this standard provides a comprehensive, structured, and risk-targeted evaluation to establish a health profile and achieve early detection of precancerous and cancerous diseases in firefighters. It utilizes a combination of physical exam, history collection, respiratory testing, laboratory testing, and the screening should also include a method of early detection, like Chris just mentioned, such as a multi-cancer blood test, ultrasound, or whatever is deemed necessary in that conversation between the patient and the healthcare practitioner to make decisions based on the exposure.
Can I make sure I understand you're speaking to the best practice for, and you'd like for this to also apply to our volunteer?
Yes.
Okay,
Yeah, this is the fire service accepted best practice.
okay,
And this is a consensus document that was, NFPA documents are created through a consensus process where all the stakeholders come together and come to an agreement on what is the accepted best practice. And those are revised regularly.
okay.
So this is one of your recommendations.
With that, we follow a standard that is specific to firefighter health and safety. Because of the very specific risk they
Yeah.
face.
I don't know how long the report is and if we should print it, but did you put a figure around that?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Which is nice. So to estimate costs, of providing every Vermont firefighter with an appropriate cancer screening, we use that standard as the basis.
Mhm.
And then we solicited estimates from established providers who specialize in 1582 compliant examinations. And then we also made comparisons of those estimates against the actual costs that some of our departments are experiencing for those who are currently already doing these examinations, just to make sure that the estimates were on target with what we were seeing in the real world. The average cost for a single compliant physical exam is about $1,000 for a firefighter. We had somewhat of this isn't a new problem, but we have somewhat of a difficult time figuring out how many firefighters there are at any given time in the state.
Sure.
So we did a survey. And we took the responses to the survey and then we proportioned those responses out to give us the total number of estimated firefighters in the state and give us their demographic makeup by age and gender so that we could make sure that we had the number right, because we know that cancer screening costs vary based on age and gender as
Okay.
well.
Okay. That's helpful.
And it still averaged out to about $1,000 a firefighter.
Okay.
So we're basing everything in the report on the estimate that there's 4,500 firefighters in the state.
Okay.
And that encompasses career and volunteer combination, all
Right.
firefighters.
Right.
So that screening, we're estimating to be about $4.5 million a year.
Okay. And if it includes professional firefighters, part of that is already encompassed in their existing agreements with their municipality,
I
right?
can't speak to that. I
Okay,
would-
so we're saying
I would defer. to Chris.
upper range is 4.5 million if we're gonna,
That would be,
Sure.
that number includes them now.
It includes-
It includes the career folks,
Okay.
and maybe getting that, some type of a screening from their employer already.
right,
One of the next question that was asked in the act was to provide, the projected cost of providing these exams to every firefighter as they enter the Vermont Fire Academy's Firefighter One programs. And I think the idea with that question, when the legislation was crafted, was to screen people as they enter the fire service, assuming that most firefighters are going to enroll in the Firefighter One program at the start of their service. And based on the number of students that we average annually, that would cost about $145,000 per year.
Okay.
Fluctuates with enrollment, but a nice average would be
So-
$145,000.
just recapping. We asked for information about making sure there's screening before there's a new,
So we can set a baseline, I mean,
right?
Yeah, one of the questions specifically called out in the act was
Yes, exactly,
was
yeah,
how much to screen these students, these assumes new people to the fire
right,
service.
yep, okay,
Act 26 then also asks us to identify opportunities to reduce the cost for fire departments to provide annual cancer screenings for their firefighters. So if it's going to be done by the locals, what can we do to cut the costs
Yeah.
incurred by them? The working group found that the most effective way to reduce the costs are to administer state contracts for screening services and allow municipal and private fire departments to utilize those contracts to provide those screenings for their members. Contracting for these services would create a more competitive market and result in lower costs for providers due to the increased volume of services provided. And we reached out to the Department of Buildings and General Services and spoke to their purchasing folks about that. And they confirmed that they routinely work on behalf of municipalities to extend a state contract pricing to local subdivisions like schools and towns.
okay,
However, it was unclear to us whether private or incorporated non-municipal fire departments would be allowed to purchase off of those contracts as written. So that's something that would need to be considered because we have a number of fire departments that are non-municipal, private, nonprofit groups. So just a little disclaimer there.
okay, so BGS doesn't currently do any statewide contracting support for firefighter cancer testing. They could, and then we might have to put something in statutorily to make sure it includes the private and obviously.
That's correct.
Okay,
Right now, municipal fire departments can take advantage of a lot of state contracts because they're a municipal entity and
Yeah.
they're included in that
and a lot of other grants.
Right.
I mean,
Yeah.
municipalities have great
Exactly.
access to.
But if you're a non-municipal department,
right. And BGS also hasn't proactively said, hey, we're creating this statewide negotiation for,
right, it was
Yeah.
purely us reaching out and having a conversation to do fact finding.
okay, so we could ask,
There's no initiative, just inquiry.
great. Thank you for.
Sure. Act 26 clearly identified the importance of providing personal protective equipment to firefighters as a cancer prevention measure, and that is incredibly important. And they asked us to project the cost for the state to fund the replacement of personal protective equipment on a rolling basis within 10 years of it being acquired. The 10 years was used because the national standard for firefighter personal protective equipment calls for it to be replaced after being in service, after 10 years after its date of manufacture. It starts to break down and degrade, and it doesn't afford the wearer the protection that it does when it's
unit.
Right, that it was designed.
Correct. So knowing that firefighter PPE is highly customizable and specifications vary from department to department, we kind of struggled with how we estimate this cost because there's a very big cost swing based on what a department is wearing. So we reached out to the 5 most popular manufacturers and asked them to provide cost estimates for their most common mid-range personal protective equipment set. And then we took all of those and we averaged them and then applied that to the number of firefighters that were estimated in the state to come to our estimate. We assumed that with a 10-year rolling program, you would want to replace 10% each year to get yourself on an alternating sustainable rotation. And we also looked at the cost of inflation, which is incredibly unpredictable in firefighting equipment.
Anything.
In anything, but especially like I'm a fire chief of a small department and I saw a 13% increase in PPE costs happen twice in the last year. So
Wow.
it's very wild and
Yeah.
unpredictable. So we asked the manufacturers to predict out over the 10-year period
Yeah.
what they expected and we figured that into the cost. So you'll see.
Great methodology, really appreciate this.
We put a lot of time into this.
Yeah.
There were a lot of meetings and a lot of brain power there, and it was not me at all. There's a table in the report that tells you what the cost would be in each year for the first 10 years based on those estimates, including inflation. So in year 1, we would start at $2,034,000 and then increase to 3.6 million in the 10th year.
Okay.
So the assumption is that is not a state pickup. The state does not currently pay for PPE.
Correct.
So, I mean, that is a
But the-
department pickup.
That's correct.
Right.
Department, municipal department. I mean,
Or individual, it depends on the department.
I think the problem is, and someone correct me if I'm wrong. We can't make an assumption because we heard from a lot of volunteer firefighters that they don't even know how old the equipment is that they're using, that no one's picking up that tab right now
But
and they're
we
using
are.
old
It's the
equipment.
point. The point is that
The state's not
the state is not picking up.
Right, but on both sides of this, if we care about our volunteer firefighters, we might wanna look at how to make this.
We care about them, but we also care about,
This would be a new cost.
this
Right,
would be a huge new cost.
and did you ask BGS about this being a statewide?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. That's gonna be one of the recommendations that I talk about next. That we
Yeah.
contract.
Senator Harrison.
Yeah, just a couple, I mean, I'm just floored by the first testimony that PPE kills you, right?
Right.
So, trying to buy things that are gonna cause harm,
Right.
that's a conversation that we need to have at some
Yeah.
point.
I don't-
But can I just ask
Sure, yeah.
a question about the screening? If folks are screened and find out earlier, well, that, they have stage 1 or 2, then the medical costs are less. So should we look at, the insurance companies paying this? The health insurance companies, because it's gonna save them, or cost share with the insurance companies? I think that might be something.
I was wondering,
Look at.
We have representatives from TS.
Right.
Okay, but I mean, I think that makes sense. It
We-
shouldn't
we
be
didn't
all on
explore how to
us.
pay for it.
That's
We
fine.
purely
Yeah,
stuck
Did
to
a lot of work.
stuck to the charge.
Yeah,
we
yeah,
had
yeah.
to
Oh, yeah.
and came up with the figures.
Yeah, no, and you're doing great
I think
work.
that's a good question. Yeah.
And this might be, my other question is just, do we wanna have recommendations in the meantime while we know this stuff is poisoning the firefighters, that they have like long sleeps under the gear and things like that? That might be a question for you.
Where underneath it will.
Right, right.
I think the toughest thing there, Senator, is how are you gonna enforce that? It comes down to
No.
education.
I'm just
Just a
saying,
guidance.
just a recommendation, just to.
And I mean, I'm just as guilty as the next, like in the summer when it's hot. I have
Right.
shorts, I wear shorts and, because the
Well,
gear is hot.
then we let your family know.
Yeah.
Your family bugs you about it.
Yeah, go
I
ahead.
mean,
But like we said earlier, like Chris said, there's a big educational piece. And I will
Oh, yeah,
speak- I'll speak to that in a
Okay.
second.
Yep.
But there are things we can do, like educating firefighters of the importance of showering immediately after
Yes.
wearing.
Right.
Reducing your exposure.
Yes.
So there are things that we can do in the meantime,
Good.
while the industry
Right.
works to get the stuff out of the materials.
Or it's forced to get the materials.
Well, there was an article last night that said all your favorite rain gear is about to be outlawed.
Oh, reindeer, I thought you said reindeer.
Reindeer.
Okay.
It's not anything that's protecting water right now
Okay,
is
okay.
awful PFAS.
Oh,
Unless it's rubber.
Unless it's.
So we might need to go back to
Rubber
regular.
doesn't.
But would it be fair to say, I'm just curious, that the more it degrades, the more dangerous it is? So, like, are your scientists finding that it's just as dangerous, maybe if not more dangerous, to put the new gear on?
So I don't know that. I know they are doing tests on the gear and taking a swab, washing it once, washing it twice,
Okay.
seeing how much of it actually goes out. Not to go too much. The funny thing that got me with this, and I'm talking about this, is you think about it, when we wash our gear, where's those PFAS going?
Right, in the drain.
So when I was talking with this attorney, it's gonna be an environmental
Yeah.
attorney, and going, like the light bulbs coming on, saying this is a larger,
Yes.
Yeah.
larger thing than we really think.
Yeah,
So, yeah, I mean, they are doing tests on that, Senator. They are looking at, does washing really, does it pull it off? Does it make it more likely to come off and attach your skin? So they're still doing that at
Okay.
this stage.
Okay.
I don't have a definitive answer yet.
So we don't know if the 20-year-old gear is more dangerous.
it could be less dangerous.
Yeah, I know.
I mean, that's kind of interesting.
Yeah, the performance.
So what we
Yeah.
do know,
That's because there's less PFAS.
but what we do know is that after that 10-year mark, it starts to lose its thermal protection and other properties. So,
Okay.
so you're,
Yeah.
so are we,
Yeah.
we're balancing, how do we protect our firefighters from all the hazards that they face up the fire?
Yes.
The thermal protection
Very
that's needed
fair.
in the vapor versus how do we protect them from
Yeah.
arsonic?
Yeah.
Good reminder.
And that's the dilemma, which I will address a little bit more in just a second. So our local knowledge tells us that there is a ton of non-compliant firefighter PPE in use across Vermont right now. So if any PPE replacement program is considered, we would urge considering expediting the replacement of the oldest and most non-compliant gear at the beginning of the program.
Okay.
And suggest that additional funding be added to any program in its infancy to make a marked improvement on that. That is the worst that we, like, let's make the biggest dent possible as quickly as we can
Right.
by focusing on the oldest and worst first. There are opportunities for the state to reduce costs of fire departments for the replacement of PPE, as we suggested with cancer screenings. There's an opportunity for state contracts. Again, we caution that private non-municipal fire departments would have to be included in that if we did that way. Opportunities also exist to reduce the cost of fire departments by developing a state-funded grant program focused on firefighter PPE replacement. And such a program could be customized to equitably distribute funding based on demonstrated need and a priority system. The working group reviewed a program that the state of Massachusetts has that successfully distributes $5 million annually to local fire departments to do just that. And it's,
So that's a granting system.
it's a state-funded granting system. Now, 5 million is a big number, and Massachusetts is certainly bigger than what we are, so that's just an example of a program that has had great success. The only similar program that Vermont fire departments have access to is the FEMA Assistance to Firefighters Grant Program. It's a federal grant program that we have access to annually. Unfortunately, in 2023, the program received 8,000 applicants across the country, and only 9 fire departments were awarded. So there is no other funding mechanism for this except what can be done locally.
I kind of want to double the tax on flavored tobacco and use it for this instead of being $14 billion. Someone's gonna murder me for saying that, but like, it's the exact amount of money we need if we're about to give
But
out.
also, I think we're failing to remember who is responsible for this, which is the manufacturer.
Yeah.
So for me, we have a model of extended manufacturer responsibility in the state that we've used for everything, from light bulbs to paint to, and I don't understand. I mean, I hope one of your recommendations is actually that we consider something that sends it back to the manufacturer and or requires the manufacturer to pay.
So that's a AG or BGS question. I mean,
It's an us question. You know,
right, well,
if we were
we're not
fired,
rich,
we were fired.
yeah,
Well, I wish we thought of it, that did not come from the working group, but it's not in the report.
that's okay,
But-
like, we've now said it out loud.
Valid.
Yeah, it is our job to find the money or figure it
Yeah,
out.
and we don't have the money. I mean, you know, that one of our challenges now is that we have less money. And so the person, who's responsible for it? The manufacturer's responsible. for
But
it.
you didn't find a bigger state that, I mean, I would think once those dominoes fall, once California or Massachusetts successfully goes after, you know, those manufacturers, we'd be in on that. But no one has led the way yet on that.
But that's something the firefighters could lead the way on, because they are one good, strong, well organized
And
national
I
unit.
would suspect once those studies that Chris spoke about.
Right.
are completed, and there is that concrete scientific data to use in that effort,
They're going to court.
that would be
Yeah,
an
I
option.
would imagine.
So Act 26 sought recommendations from us on how to tackle the problem of firefighter cancer, and in the report, we offer the following. The working group concluded that the Vermont Fire Service needs to be better informed on the topic of firefighter cancer. While we provide cancer awareness training at every opportunity, we need to double our efforts to spread the message about cancer prevention, detection, screening, and the importance of registering with the National Firefighter Registry for Cancer, which I'll talk about in
Okay.
a second.
And you're saying go beyond training of new people to like,
Right.
you're
We
guided.
need to continue, so we need to focus our efforts on changing the culture in the fire service.
Yeah,
We're getting the message through to the new firefighters very well.
right.
They're a captive audience.
Well, they're your cap.
Sitting in our training classes.
Yeah.
But those veterans that have done it that way forever.
Yeah,
That's a culture change.
right.
That we.
So there's no statutory like what you're looking for there.
No.
It's, I mean, you all get it.
It's-
Yeah.
It's just a focus that it needs to be a focus.
Senator Cummings.
I guess I already know the answer. Firefighter insurance would normally come through the municipality, or do you have a unified plan?
No, it's, so for municipal departments, it's typically comes through the municipality. Oftentimes it's the League of Cities and Towns
I was
program.
gonna say, it shouldn't get deal.
Yeah, but there are fire departments, that are nonprofit, private, who seek non-municipal insurance. And then there's a mix, because there's nothing simple, right? But, so for example, I belong to a municipal fire department, yet our fire department is not insured through the league and through the municipal coverage, because our select board opted to seek out fire service specific insurance to give ourselves better coverage.
And is it better covered? Better than what VLCT offers through the municipal?
So I just wanna do a time check. We have 15 minutes left. I wanna make sure. When I hear this, I'm thinking we could attach this to the workers' comp bill that gets us past crossover to continue working on this. And I do believe we have a vehicle.
Well, and there's a workers' comp bill coming.
That's right. So there's, you know,
Right,
there's,
from the house.
we haven't.
Yeah.
So how are other witnesses feeling?
Which means it's not.
What are we attaching to workers?
If we do anything on
Oh,
this?
if we do anything,
Yes,
okay.
yeah.
Got it.
No, this isn't, we're not looking for something before crossover, so we can
We have time.
space this out.
Exactly, it's a house.
Cameron.
Madam Chair, I was just gonna mention I didn't necessarily speak for my colleagues,
Yeah.
but Department of Labor and Financial Regulation are here actually on a separate report to what you've been hearing.
Oh, that's right.
It's
Okay.
related to the presumption and workers' comp coverage for firefighters, with cancer,
Right.
but it is a little bit separate than what you've been hearing.
Well, that's why I thought of the workers' comp piece and we can keep.
Yeah.
So we might have you all come back, because we have time to look at this. If you have more you need to say, and
Just a little bit more.
Yeah. this is important.
So.
I have a question, if that, or can use up time. So, I don't know if, obviously this wouldn't have been in the charge of Act 626. But, are you aware of like other countries, any European countries that have this, the gear without PFAS? Does it exist somewhere?
We're not aware of it.
Is it worth finding out for
Um,
sure?
I would think that if the materials existed without PFAS, the fire service would be aware of it.
Well,
And I don't think we are.
Right.
I don't,
It's an
yeah, I
invention
try not to
opportunity.
assume things,
It's being
but,
heavily researched.
okay,
Um,
people, okay.
And I do have a little.
They'd probably be buying their gear from Germany or something.
That's what I'm,
Yeah.
yeah,
So, yeah, I mean, it's,
I mean,
Wanna-
the expense of
yeah,
cancer and the tragedy of cancer is
Right.
so much that
Right.
it's worth. You know,
I could certainly look into that, Senator. Run down in DC, I'll ask the IFF, what
yeah,
they know,
and they probably.
Right.
the
would.
European and stuff and see what. I know some of the stuff they do is that they do things a little differently over there too. They like don't put their gear on until they get to the scene. They
Okay,
have like
Very
clean
interesting.
cabs.
yeah,
Relatively new concept in this country, so
yeah,
I will reach out to them and I can circle back sometime next couple, 3 weeks.
right,
Yeah, because there are ways we can protect people at the
Yeah.
moment,
okay,
right,
maybe a little better than we currently are.
yeah, did you find your place?
European countries
Okay.
have 50% income tax,
But
Yes,
they have no money.
go
they do
back
have more money.
to,
They have
So one of the, I mentioned the survey that we performed. One of the questions that a couple of the questions that we asked, tried to get an idea on what the cancer picture looked like in Vermont across firefighters, because we don't really have a clear idea.
Yeah.
Last session, the League of Cities and Towns provided testimony that they've only received 9 firefighter cancer presumptive claims since 2008. And while they're not the sole provider of workers' compensation, we suspect that they're the largest. 35% of Vermont fire departments responded to our survey, and in that survey, we identified 73 cancer cases known to the respondents. So
so a big disconnect.
this suggests to
Yeah.
us that it's really underreported,
Right.
and it kind of speaks to the fact that we need better data.
Yeah,
So again, that can be improved with education.
right,
Helping firefighters to realize that there may be an occupational component to this could potentially bring us better reporting through the workers' compensation system.
I would assume the fires you respond to may be different than the fires, say, in Boston, where you've got everything is a big, tall, enclosed building, whereas we tend to have more separation.
The exposures from those fires
Yeah.
are the same, whether you're in
Okay.
Vermont or in a big metropolitan city.
Right.
The risks and the exposures are the same.
But if
The
you
building may-
go to a fire, I lived in Boston, the sirens went every 30 seconds. And so you may be getting a lot more exposure there if you're going out 3 times a day or 2 times a day. Whereas here, I think the ambulance goes out and up.
Yeah, so exposure is a big piece because we know that the number of exposures you have are certainly contribute to the risk factor. So when you look at it's very varied across the state. So in my area, in Rutland County, where I'm from, there's a department near me who has responded to over 20 building fires last year.
it's a lot.
Okay, and then we know career firefighters in the larger cities in Vermont who responded to nowhere near that many fires just by luck, just
Look at the draw.
by the luck of the draw, right? Or the unlucky
Yeah,
draw.
which one, which,
Right,
Yeah.
so exposure, you're absolutely right, exposure plays a big role, but it's hard to correlate the and then there's another exposure, a career firefighter is exposed to diesel exhaust. Every day they're on shift, and we know that that's a risk factor, right? So they have that, so there are so many variables in exposures that it's hard to say it's a career versus volunteer or a metro versus rural makeup.
but it might make it more important that we get our own reliable statistics, so that tells us if there is a difference.
So like just your 35 departments responded to your survey, out of how many departments are there?
So there's about, I don't have the exact number, it's about 220, 35% responded.
Oh, 35%.
Yes.
okay.
Still not very.
And then I just wanna add, when they train, which they do on a regular basis, typically you have your gear on, right? So if the gear is the problem, that's increasing.
And wearing it in the truck, where,
Right, but usually, I mean, it's at least once a month that you train normally, and I think some do more. So So you might be doing that as much as you're doing fires,
Yes.
or you should be.
It does, it comes down to the education side, like, do you really need to be in full structural gear when you're doing, say, technical rescue
Yeah,
training?
so maybe
No, not
not.
really.
So we,
You know, like the president of the IFF says, when you go in a car crash, you're more worried about cuts and scrapes, maybe use Carhartt gear, which doesn't have PFAS, give you that good abrasive carbon.
Yeah.
So you're not exposed to it. So it's just like,
yeah,
like Chief Scaz is gonna say, is a lot of it we're missing is that education piece
yeah,
and getting that cultural shift.
Yeah.
Which is gonna be a challenge.
right, but it's worth it. It's
You know,
safety.
I think they know better than.
You can tell people
Yeah.
that.
And those are the stopgap measures that we'll be taking until the product is safe.
Right, I was 5, 6, almost 10 of us were locked in an elevator at the pavilion. The Montpelier Fire Department came to get us out in full regalia. There was no reason, there was no fire. I think they had a crowbar, just propped the door. But they were wearing a whole 1.5 blocks down the street. But that again is time you wear the firefighting, then you really don't need it.
Absolutely, we're just scratching the surface on that
Yeah.
too, so.
Okay, how are you doing?
So regarding the data, as we talked about, there's gaps in the data. Vermont's vital records reporting system does not provide a means to capture cancer deaths within firefighters, especially in volunteers. Because often when you list their occupation, it's the full-time employment that is listed. So there's a recommendation to consider, can a change be made to the reporting of death certificates to identify firefighters? So that a link can be made between cancer deaths and firefighters. Steps should also be taken to ensure that the Vermont Health Department's cancer registry, because that exists, is shaking hands and sharing data with the National Firefighter Cancer Registry, which is new. And we are working, again, an education piece to get as many Vermont firefighters registered in that system as we can.
Okay.
So the national system collects the firefighter identifying information, and then the state cancer registry ideally pushes data into that system, and they match the two to identify which of the cancer cases in the state registry are firefighters, and we get better data.
That's
So-
good.
So trying to making sure that the health department's cancer registry is handshaking with the national system is important. And then, you know, I think we beat to death the elimination of PFAS and firefighter PPE. We know that PFAS is a carcinogen. We know it's in our firefighting gear. We know that we have intimate skin contact. We searched high and low and were unable to find specific studies that provide scientific conclusion that cancer is being caused by that exposure, but anecdotally, it's present, it's on us.
Yeah.
You know, you would assume that it must be. So those studies that Chris spoke about are what's going to be the key to prove, you know, scientifically proving that, so that the action that you were talking about
Right.
can be added on. But here's the problem currently, there's no structural firefighting gear on the market that is PFAS free.
Okay.
And manufacturers have made efforts to reduce that. There has been testing of those. But so far the materials that they have provided for testing do not afford the same protection in thermal protection to firefighters. And they do not provide the same resistance to flammable liquids.
Okay.
So there's some deficiencies in what they've developed so far. So given the lack of an acceptable alternative, we're really we think it's reasonable to work towards the replacement of current gear with PFAS-free gear once it's available, but understanding it's not there yet. So we have to do all these other things to try
Yes.
to mitigate that exposure.
But in the meantime, and this is still a big undertaking, in the meantime, there's a question of the honesty of the advertising for the gear that is being purchased, that if they say PFAS free, someone might take less precaution that they should.
Yeah. I haven't seen.
Does anything advertise it?
I haven't seen.
I don't know, I thought Chris was saying, they're,
They will advertise that certain players are PFAS free,
okay, so they're not
but there's.
big dishonest.
It depends on how it's being worded.
Okay,
So
okay.
Yeah.
I just think that we're gonna hear about the other report, because there's another report
Yes.
that was done by
Mary,
DFR.
can you preview that for us? Oh, Senator Brockett,
She has 3 minutes.
I can,
Pretty
I can brief.
sensible when studies that you're referring to about the equipment will be complete or at least definitive enough to draw conclusions.
I don't have that information. I don't, Chris.
So, like with the PFAS you're talking about, so the challenge that our scientists are telling us is that when they branch these poly or perfluorinated out, the current testing mechanisms can't pick up those. So they're not seeing it until they come up with that test. So there's enough evidence from these scientists saying that they can't prove it, but they know in their heart that it is there. It's just a matter of coming up with that testing mechanism to identify that when they run it through their machines.
And is there any methodology to indicate that those things are in fact carcinogenic?
So, yes, I can give you that and I'll upload it to your assistant. So with PFAS, they're showing it with birth weights, how it affects siblings. There's an effect there. There's an effect with specific cancers like,
Well, I know there's
like bladders.
issues regarding
cancers.
PFAS. I'm referring to the other components that, for which there doesn't appear to be adequate testing to say that they are in fact carcinogenic, if I heard correctly.
That they, can you repeat that again?
You've got some components
Yeah,
that are definitely PFAS, that are
yes,
carcinogenic.
yes,
You have other components that they believe may be carcinogenic and may act like PFAS, but there's no testing right now
correct.
that will adequately identify
Yes.
that. And so the question I have really is there a linkage between those other components that are in equipment that does not have any PFAS of the kind that you can test
Yeah,
to show that there is in fact an increased incident of cancer of people who use that equipment
okay.
that is essentially PFAS free as we define PFAS right now.
Yes, so they're still studying that. The information that I got when I was down there was that the science side, instead of saying PFAS or PFOs, those are all the what they call the legacy ones back in 2010. They've since changed it, that the main structure is essentially the same, it's branched out. They don't have enough, first of all, they can't test it. So even if you get it in your blood, there's no way for them to really test it yet to see what those levels are. They're working on trying to, however they do with it, the specificity of the test to make it so they can identify those, but right now they can't. But they said that there's enough from their research, there's enough certainty that they're there. And that they do have an effect much similar to the legacy type. They just have to come up with that test. They can say, yes, they are here, they're in this amount. And we do show that, but until that test comes out, that they can have that being that specific, there's really no way of knowing.
Let's end there.
I was just gonna say,
Okay.
from my time on health and welfare, when we did ban PFAS,
Yeah.
then that we banned it in wrapping food. One thing I learned is the PFAS is way beyond my chemistry. As a massive group of chemical components, and you change one component here because we had to be very specific about Q and a P because we would do something we didn't want to. So it's that complex that you could probably change one element and it wouldn't be a PFA, it might be a PFAS.
Yeah,
Okay,
exactly.
so I hope DOL and DFR didn't feel like this was time wasted. Apologize there. Clearly want to hear your piece because it will be our vehicle for anything else we might do. So we'll work on rescheduling that. But really appreciate this. I think this set the stage that we asked for information. We do need to act, thinking of ways to find funding. So we will to be continued, and we'll go off live